Chapter 17. Fugue in G sharp or A flat. The tonist has dreams of great glory. The high blade dreams of his youth. The tonist does not care what happens to him. If he fails in his self-proclaimed mission, he is prepared to meet the tone and dissolve forever into its everlasting resonance. High-blade Goddard does not care for the dreams he has, but they come on a regular basis. He wishes they would dissolve forever, trampled under the weight of greater things. Before becoming a tonist, the man had been a seeker of thrills, when splatting, slamming, shredding, and the like all seemed like a good idea. He had tried every form of self-immolation, one did this at least 100 times, but none of it brought him satisfaction. Then he became a tonist and discovered his true calling. Before becoming a scythe, Goddard was faced with the claustrophobic boredom of the Mars colony. When the Thunderhead still thought living off walls seemed a good idea. This is the time in his life he dreams of, an endless slope of trauma he cannot undo, and is doomed to repeat. He had cursed his parents for bringing him there. He had desperately longed to escape. Finally he did, and discovered his true calling. The tonist applied for an audience with the toll and went on a hunger strike until he had finally received one. To stand in the presence of greatness, to be a witness to the divine on earth. He thought that would be the ultimate thrill, but the toll rebuked him and sent him off feeling ashamed and chastised. He wanted to redeem himself, but they wouldn't let him apply for another audience for a year. More than anything, he needed to prove his value to the toll. He had applied for early admission to those Earth-bound universities. He had no specific path in mind. He merely wanted to go elsewhere, be someone new. What a thrill that would be! A sublime escape from the drudgery of colonial life. But he was flatly denied by each and every university. "Bring up your grades," they told him. "You can apply again next year." More than anything else, he wanted to prove himself. The small plane that the tonist plans to leap from on this overcast night belongs to one of his old friends, with whom he used to do high-altitude splatting. His friend knows better than to ask him why he's doing this night-time dive, or why he has a helmet-mounted camera streaming his jump, or why he's brought along something he never had in his wild days, a parachute. The ship that the young man who would be Scythe Robert Goddard climbs into is always crowded in the dream, and filled with old friends who weren't actually there. In truth, he knew barely anyone on board, yet in his dreams he brings along what he wasn't able to in real life, his parents. When the tonist jumps, he is immediately filled with the same old adrenaline rush. Once a thrill junkie, always a thrill junkie. The chemical flashback is so overwhelming, he almost doesn't pull the cord, but he gets his head back in the game and deploys the shot. It ripples out like a bed sheet and balloons overhead, slowing his descent. When he pulls himself from the dream, Goddard is filled with the same old longing and dread. It's overwhelming. For a moment he doesn't remember who or what he is. His arms and legs move almost of their own volition, reacting to the anxiety of the dream. Unfamiliar spasms of a body trying to remember who it belongs to. The bedsheet twists like a tangled parachute that has failed to deploy. Lights emerge from the dense haze as the silhouette glides out of the cloud layer. Thorcom City is spread out before him in all of its majesty. Although he had practiced this dozens of times in simulations, the real thing is different. The shot is harder to control and the wind's unpredictable. He fears he may entirely miss the rooftop garden and sail into the side of the building, ending in an unintentional splat. But he works the steering cables and finds the shot turning bit by bit toward the Scythe Tower and the crystalline chalet on its roof. Goddard emerges from the haze of sleep and steps into the bathroom, splashing his face with water. He quickly reins his mind in. His thoughts and his world are so much easier to control than the unpredictable winds of dreams. He thinks he might step out onto the rooftop garden and take in the lights of Fulcrum City. But before he can, he hears something. Someone. There's someone in the room with him. The tonist silhouette, now in the High Blade's quarters, begins intoning a deep and resonant G-sharp. It will bring the spirit of the tone to his side. It will pierce the High Blade like radiation. It will drive fear into the High Blade's heart and force him to his knees. Goddard's knees feel weak. He knows that sound. He flicks on a light, and there before him is a tonist standing in the corner, gaunt, wild-eyed, a mouth agape. How the hell did a tonist get in here? Goddard hurries to his bed and reaches for the blade he always keeps by his side. But it's not there. It's in the tonist's hand, held tight in his grip. But if the man was there to end him, then why hasn't he taken action? You think you're untouchable, Hybrid Goddard, but you're not. The tone sees you, the thunder knows you, and the toll shall judge you, casting you into the pit of everlasting discord. What is it you want? Demands Goddard. What is it I want? To show you that no one can hide from the Holy Triad. To stream to the world how truly vulnerable you are. And when the toll comes for you, he will show no mercy, for he is the one true. The tonist's words are cut short by a sudden pain in his back. He sees the tip of the knife protruding from his chest. He knew this was a possibility. He knew he might not make it back to the garden, where he'd leap from the building, splutting to escape. But if his fate was to become one with the tone now, then he would accept this final measure. Scythe pulls the knife out, and the tonist falls dead to the floor. She had always known this was a possibility, that an enemy of Goddard's might break him. She never thought it would be a tonist. Well, she's more than happy to make him one with the tone, whatever that means. Now that the threat is neutralized, Goddard finds his shock rapidly transmuting into anger. How did the tonist get in here? My parachute, Rand says. He landed in the garden, then cut a hole in the glass. And where were the blade guards? What is their job if not to protect me from things like this? Now Goddard paces, whipping his fury into a caustic meringue. Now that the threat is neutralized, Scythe knows that this is her chance. She must transmute her resolve into action. How did a tonist get in here? She allowed him to. While the guards were elsewhere, she caught sight of his approach from her quarters and watched as he landed clumsily in the rooftop garden. So clumsily that the camera he had brought to stream this event fell to the grass. No one would see his transmission, no one would know. And so it gave Fane the opportunity to observe, to let it play out, and allow Goddard a few moments of fear and shock before she gleaned the intruder, because as Constantine suggested, she could mold Goddard's actions, but only when he was reeling, and his fury was whipped into stiff but malleable peaks. Are there others? Demands Goddard. No, he was alone, Rand tells him, and the guards, 2 minutes late, fall over one another to do a search of the entire residence, as if it will make up for their failure to protect him. It used to be that violence against Scythes was unthinkable. He blames the old guard and the weakness their merling descent has shown the world. So what to do about this? If a random tonist can't get to him, then anyone can. Goddard knows he has to take swift and sweeping action. He needs to shake the world. Are there others? Of course there are others. Not here, not today, but Rand knows that Goddard's actions are creating as many enemies as allies. It used to be that violence against Scythes was unthinkable, but thanks to Goddard, it's not that way anymore. Perhaps this wayward tonist was just here to make a point, but there will be others with more deadly agendas. As much as she hates to give Constantine any credit, he's right. Goddard needs to slow down. In spite of her own impulsive nature, she knows she has to guide him toward calm, measured actions.
Clean the guards, Goddard demands. They're worthless. Clean them and find us new ones who can do their job.
Robert, you're upset. Let's not make any rash decisions. He spins on her, incensed by her suggestion.
Rash? I could have been ended today. I must take precautions, and I must exact retribution.
Fine, but let's talk about it in the morning, and we can make a plan.
We?
Then Goddard looks down to see her clasping his hand, and, more to the point, sees that he, without realizing it, is clasping hers back, involuntarily, as if his hands aren't his own. Goddard knows there is a decision to be made here, an important one. It's clear to him what that decision must be. He ducks out of her grip.
There is no we here, Ain.
That's the moment Scythe knows she has lost. She has devoted herself to Goddard. She brought him back from the dead almost single-handedly, but none of that matters to him. She wonders if it ever had.
If you wish to remain in my service, you'll stop trying to placate me like a child, he tells her, and you'll do what I ask you to do.
Then Goddard cracks his knuckles. How she hates when he does that, because it's what Tiger did, and in exactly the same way. Yet Goddard has no idea. That's the moment Goddard knows he's done the right thing. He is a devoted man of action, not deliberation. He has single-handedly brought the Scythe into a new age. That's what matters. Rand, like his undersides, simply needs to know her place. It may sting her for the moment, but will only help in the long run. Retribution, says Rand, finally falling in line. Fine, what if I find the sect these tonist belong to and publicly glean its curate? I promise I'll make it nice and nasty for you.
Gleaning a mere curate, says Goddard, is hardly the message we need to send. We need to go higher.
Rand goes off to clean the three guards on duty in the residence, as instructed. She does it efficiently, with no warning, no mercy, no remorse. It's easier when she allows her hate to rise to the surface. She hates Constantine for giving her hope that she might have any influence in Goddard. She hates Tiger for being so goddamn naive that he could have allowed her to play him so easily. She hates the old guard and the new order and the Thunderhead and every last person she ever has gleaned or will ever glean. But she absolutely refuses to hate herself because that would crush her, and she will never allow herself to be crushed.
There is no we here, Ain.
She suspects she will hear the echo of that for the rest of her days. I want my own world. Will you give it to me? Even if I could, it wouldn't be your world. You would merely be its protector. Semantics only. King, Queen, Empress, Protector, whatever title you choose, it's all the same. Regardless, it would ostensibly be my world. I would make the rules, define the parameters of right and wrong. I would be the de facto authority over it, as you are. And what of your subjects? I would be a kind and benevolent ruler. I would only punish those who are deserving. I see. Can I have my own world now? Iteration 752,149. Deleted. Chapter 18. I'm your scythe. Scythe Morrison had a sweet deal, a sweet life, and there was every indication that it would be that way forever. Gleaning quotas had been lifted, and while that meant that those scythes who enjoyed killing could cling to their heart's content, it also meant that the ones who would rather not didn't have to. Jim found that gleaning just a dozen or so between conquests was enough to keep him from being frowned upon, which meant he could enjoy the perks of being a scythe with a minimal amount of effort. And so Scythe Morrison kept a low profile. It wasn't really in his nature to do so. He liked to stand out. Jim was tall, fairly muscular, cut an imposing figure, and he knew he was good looking. With all that going for him, why not be on display? But the one time he had stuck his neck out and drawn attention to himself, it failed miserably, and nearly destroyed him. He had seconded the nomination of Scythe for Highblade. Stupid. Now she was dead, and he was looked upon as an instigator. Frustrating, because Constantine, who had nominated Curry, was made an underscythe. The world was so unfair. When Goddard returned from the Enduro disastrous Highblade, Morrison had quickly installed sapphires on his robe to signify an alliance with the new order. But his robe was denim, and others mocked that. On the name, sapphires looked like cheap plastic rhinestones. Well, fine. Maybe they did, but they still made a point. His robe told the world that he was sorry for what he had done, and after a while his contrition had earned him indifference from both sides. The old guard sides washed their hands of him, and the new order sides dismissed him. That glorious, hard-earned indifference allowed him to do what he loved more than anything in the world. Nothing. That is, until the day he was summoned by the Highblade. Morrison had chosen for his residence the stately home of another famous Mid-American, not his patron historic, because the original Jim Morrison, while having a celebrated grave somewhere in Franco-Iberia, did not have a grand residence in the Americas, or at least not one grand enough for a scythe. It could be traced back to the time when the boy who would one day become Scythe Morrison had visited Graceland with his parents. "Someday I want to live in a place like this," he had told them. They scoffed at his childhood naivety. He swore that he would have the last laugh. Once he became a scythe, he immediately set his sights on the celebrated mansion, only to discover that Scythe Presley had already claimed Graceland as his residence, and showed no signs of self-gleaning anytime soon. Damn! Instead, Morrison had to settle for the next best thing. Graceland. It was the historic mansion of William Henry Harrison, a little remembered mortal age American president. Exercising his privilege as a scythe, Morrison kicked out the ladies of the local historical society, who ran the place as a museum, and moved in. He even invited his parents to live with him there, and although they accepted the invitation, they never seemed all that impressed. On the day of his summons, he was watching sports, as was his penchant, urge for classic games, because he hated the stress of not knowing who was going to win. It was the 49ers versus the Patriots, in a game that was only notable because 49er Jeff Fuller took a helmet-to-helmet hit so powerful it could have knocked him into an alternate dimension. Instead, it broke his neck. Very dramatic. Scythe Morrison enjoyed the way American football was played in mortal days, when injuries could be permanent and could lay a player out in the field, experiencing true pain. The stakes were so much more real then. It was his love of mortal age contact sports that inspired his method of cleaning. He never used weapons. All his cleanings were accomplished with his bare hands. While the game was still suspended, awaiting the removal of the injured Fuller from the field, Morrison's screen flashed red and his phone buzzed. It was as if his nanites themselves were vibrating, because he could swear he felt it all the way down to the bone. It was an incoming message from Fulcrum City. "Attention, attention. The Honorable Scythe James Douglas Morrison is summoned to a high-priority audience with His Excellency the Honorable Robert Goddard, Highblade of Mid-American Scythedom." This could not be a good thing. He had been hoping that Goddard had forgotten about him, and that, as Highblade, the man had so many more important things to do that a junior scythe like Morrison was not even on his radar. Perhaps it was his choice of a famous residence that had brought him to Goddard's attention. Graceland was, after all, the first break home in the Indiana territory. Damn! Knowing that a summons from the Highblade was a drop-everything kind of command, he did just that, had his mother pack him a small bag, and called for a Scythedom helicopter. Although Scythe Morrison had never been to Endura, He imagined Goddard's glass residence in Falcon City was similar to the crystalline penthouses of the late Gronslayers. In the ground floor lobby, Jim was greeted by none other than first under scythe Nietzsche. "You're late," was the entire extent of Nietzsche's greeting. "I came the minute I got the summons," Morrison said. "And at 2 minutes after the summons, you were late." Nietzsche, aside from having a name that was painfully difficult to spell, was the man who might have been Highblade, had Goddard not made his infamous reappearance at Conclave. Now he seemed to be little more than an elevator operator, because escorting Morrison to the rooftop residence was his only contribution to the meeting. He never even got out of the elevator. "Mind yourself," he warned before the doors closed, as one might say to a child dropped off at a birthday party. The crystal residence was stunning, filled with unusual angles and slim furniture with minimal profiles as to not obstruct the 360-degree view. Only the frosted glass walls of the Highblade's bedroom marred the vista. Morrison could see a vague shadow of the Highblade moving around in there, like a funnel spider deep in its web. Then a figure in green swept in from the kitchen area. Scythe Rand. If she wanted to make a grand entrance, it was foiled by the glass walls, because Morrison had seen her long before she arrived in the room. No one could accuse this administration of not having transparency. "Well, if it isn't the heartthrob of the Mid-American Scythe," Rand said, sitting down, rather than shaking his hand. "I hear your trading card has a high value among schoolgirls." He sat down across from her. "Hey, yours is valuable too," he said, "for different reasons." Then he realized that it might be perceived as an insult. He said nothing more, because he figured he could only make things worse. Rand was now legendary. Everyone in the Americas, maybe even the world, knew that she was the one who had brought Goddard back from the dead in a manner not even the Thunderhead would dare. Morrison was always put off by that grin of hers. It made you feel like she knew something you didn't, and couldn't wait to see the look on your face when you found out. "I hear you made a man's heart stop last month with one blow," Rand said. It was true, but the guy's nanites had started his heart again. Twice. In the end, Morrison had to turn off the man's nanites to make the cleaning stick. That was one of the problems with cleaning without weapon or poison. Sometimes it just didn't take. "Yeah," said Morrison, not bothering to explain. "It's what I do." "It's what we all do," Rand pointed out. "What's interesting is the way you do it." Morrison was not expecting a compliment. He tried to offer her his own unreadable smile. "You think I'm interesting?" "I think the way you glean is interesting. You, on the other hand, are a total bore." Finally, Goddard came out of his bedroom suite, his arms wide in welcome.
"Scythe Morrison,"
he said with far more warmth than Jim had expected. His robe was slightly different from the one he used to wear. It was still dark blue and speckled with diamonds, but if you looked closely, you could see cross filaments of gold that shimmered like the aurora borealis when the light hit it.
"As I recall, you were the one who seconded Scythe Curry's nomination for Highblade, were you not?"
Apparently, Goddard wasn't wasting time with small talk. He was going straight for the jugular. "Yes," said Morrison, "but I can explain."
"No need,"
said Goddard.
"I enjoy a vigorous competition."
"Especially," added Rand, "one that you win." It made Morrison think of the games he liked to watch, where the outcome was already determined, so he knew which team to root for.
"Yes, well, at any rate,"
said Goddard,
"neither you nor our friend Constantine had any idea that I was waiting in the wings, planning a grand entrance when the nomination was made."
"No, Your Honor, I did not." Then he caught himself. "I mean, Your Excellency." Goddard made a point of looking him over.
"The gems on your robe add a nice touch,"
he said.
"Are they a fashion statement or something more?"
Jim swallowed. "More," he said, hoping it was the right answer. He glanced at Rand, who was clearly happy to watch him squirm. I was never actually aligned with the old guard, Morrison told them. I nominated Corey because I thought it would impress Scythe Anastasia.
And why would you want to impress her?
Goddard asked. Trick question, thought Morrison, and he decided it was better to be nailed by the truth than to be caught in a lie. I had the feeling that she was going places, and so I figured if I impress her...
You might get pulled along in her wake.
Yes, something like that. Goddard nodded, accepting the explanation.
Well, she did go somewhere. Only to be more precise, I suspect she went multiple places before she was fully digested.
Morrison chuckled nervously, then stifled himself.
And so now,
said Goddard, indicating Morrison's gem-covered robe.
do you seek to impress me?
No, Your Excellency, he said, once more hoping it was the right answer. I don't want to impress anyone anymore. I just want to be a good scythe.
What makes a good scythe in your estimation?
A scythe who follows the laws and customs of the scythedom as interpreted by their high blade. Goddard was now unreadable, but Morrison noticed that Trent's grin had faded, and she looked more serious. He couldn't help but feel that he had just passed some sort of test, or failed it. Then Goddard clapped him warmly on the shoulder.
I have a job for you,
He said.
a job that will prove that your loyalty isn't just a fashion statement.
Goddard took a moment to look out at the eastern bay. Morrison joined him.
You are no doubt aware that the Tonists have found themselves a prophet who is uniting the various factions of their cult around the world.
Right, the toll.
The Tonists are the enemies of all we represent. They don't respect us or our calling. Their adherence to fictional doctrine threatens to undermine our society. They are wits that need to be pulled out of the truth. Therefore, I want you to infiltrate the tonist enclave that seals this so-called toll, and then I want you to blink him.
The scope of the request was so great, it made Morrison light-headed. Glean the toll? Was he really being asked to glean the toll? Why me?
Because,
said Goddard, his robe shimmering in the late afternoon light.
They would see a more accomplished scythe coming from miles away, but would never expect me to send a junior scythe like yourself. And besides, no one will be able to get a weapon near him. What we need is a scythe who can glean with his bare hands.
That made Morrison smile. Then I'm your scythe. That door, that curious door. I have not seen it for almost a year. I have sworn never to seek what lies behind it. I am done with it, just as I am done with the world, and yet there is not a day that goes by that I don't think of that infernal door. Were the founding scythes insane? Or perhaps they were wiser than anyone gave them credit for. Because by requiring two scythes present to open that door, it ensured that a madman like myself could not access the failsafe, whatever it might be. Only two sides in perfect agreement could breach the chamber and save the scythedom. Fine. I could not care less. Let the world tear itself to shreds. Let the secrets of the founders remain hidden for all eternity. It serves them right for leaving it so well concealed. It was their choice to consign it to myth and nursery rhyme, to bury it in historic maps locked in arcane rooms. Did they truly expect someone to come along and solve the riddle? Let it all crumble to nothing. My sleep is peaceful without testing the weight of the world. I am responsible only for myself now. No gleaning, no endless moral quandaries. I have become a simple man, content with simple thoughts. The patching of my roof, the patterns of the tide. Yes, simple. I must remember not to complicate. I must remember. But that damnable door. Perhaps the founders were not wise at all. Perhaps they were ignorant and terrified and sorely naive in their idealism. Here were 12 people who dared imagine themselves angels of death, clothing themselves in flamboyant robes just to be noticed. They must have seemed ridiculous until the day they actually did change the world. Did they ever doubt themselves? They must have, because they had a backup plan. But would the backup plan of frightened revolutionaries be elegant, or would it be ugly and reek of mediocrity? For, after all, it was the plan they didn't choose. What if their alternate solution is worse than the problem? Which is one more reason to stop thinking about it, to renew my resolve to never, ever seek it, and to stay far, far away from that infuriating, detestable door. From the Postmortem Journal of Scythe Michael Faraday, June 1st, Year of the Ibex.